Is part 2 of your notes on significant figures. Please continue working on this significant figures guided note sheet. So we did rules 1 and 2 in the first video, and now we're going to focus on rules 3 and 4. So for rule number 3, all zeros at the end of a number are only significant if there is a decimal point in that number. And so what that means is, for example, according to Google, The Rock is 260 pounds. I don't know if he's exactly 260 or if he's like 262, 263, 264. He can't be 265 because then they would be rounding the wrong way. Maybe he's 258. I don't know. But if it were to have been written like this, 260.0, then I would know that it was precise, because that decimal point there tells me that these are exact numbers, that he is definitely that size. But I don't know, not for sure. But if there's a decimal point there, that's when zeros get counted, when they're at the end of numbers. So here's another example. This one is an okay example because, there is a decimal point here, but these would be considered significant anyway, these two zeros, because there's a 1 on either side of them, so they're also between non-zero numbers, like in rule number 2. So for 2 reasons, these zeros are significant. Now, if we write this the other way, though, these first 2 zeros are still significant because they're between the 1s, but then all of these zeros on the end, because now there's no decimal point here anymore, these are not significant, and so this would only have 4 sig figs. Okay, and now let's do this example here. How many sig figs are in each of these numbers? And so this is when you go to rule 3 on the check for understanding, and you're going to predict how many sig figs there are in each of those. And I just realized I showed the key version instead of the example version, so if you're real good, then you can probably figure out what those are. Okay, so let's talk about why they are these values. First one here, we've got this decimal point here, and then all of these zeros following the decimal point get to count because that decimal point is there. And so we wouldn't put those zeros at the end of this number because we could just say 1. Like this just means 1. This is just like a really, 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 really definitely, specifically, absolutely 1. So it has more sig figs, like it's really definitely perfectly 1. But this one, we have the 0 that's in between and then the 0 on the end. All of those are significant, so we've got 5 sig figs here. In this one, same thing. These are the betweens, and so they would count even if there wasn't the decimal point here, but because we have a decimal point and a 0 following it, that one also gets counted, so all of these are significant. And then our last one, this 0 that is in between, that gets counted because it's in between, regardless of the fact that there's a decimal point here. So all of these are significant, all 5 of them. Okay, let's move on to our 4th and final rule, and that is that zeros before the non-zero numbers start are not significant. So here's a sweet little hedgehog. It's only 2 weeks old, and he weighs 0.660 pounds. So the non-zero number that is before, the 0 before the non-zero number, so this 0 right here, that comes in basically as a placeholder before the non-zero numbers start, and it does not get counted. Whereas this 0, it's only there to show that it's exactly 0.660 pounds. It wouldn't be there unless it was, in fact, significant, so it does get counted. Now, this one, a piece of copy paper is 0.004 inches thick. These zeros that come before that non-zero number starts, they're not significant. None of those zeros count. So this one just has 1 significant figure. And here is our last example that you will write in your little example on your notes. So the thickness of a knife is 0.0920 inches, and the first 2 zeros These are the numbers, the zeros that come before the non-zero numbers start, so they are not significant. But the zero that comes after, the one that's on the end, because there is a decimal point here, that does count. So this zero wouldn't be here unless we knew that it was significant. Okay, now let's do some review of Rule 4. How many sig figs are in each of these? So come down to where it says Rule 4 and predict for those. Okay, so for 0.1030, all of the zeros that come after that decimal point count, but the one that comes before that one, it does not count. Zeros before the non-zero number start are not significant. Here, all of these zeros come before a non-zero number starts, so none of those are significant, but the 2 being a non-zero number is. So that's why this only has one sig fig. Here, these don't count, but the 0 that comes after the non-zero numbers does count. So these 2 digits here are the 2 that are significant. And this one is basically the same thing as this. It just has one fewer leading 0. These 2 zeros are not significant because they come before the non-zero numbers start. And then this 0, because it comes after the non-zero numbers and there's a decimal point here, it does get counted. So those 2 are the significant figures. Okay, now we're going to do a review of all of the rules. This is where you're going to be writing in that 4th and final box down here where it says all rules. Please predict the number of sig figs in each of these numbers. So in 8,080, the 0 that is between the 8s, that does get counted because it is between significant figures. So these 3 are significant, but this 0 on the end is not significant because there's no decimal point here. In this one, the only significant figure is our non-zero, the 2. The rest of these could all be rounded off. This could actually be 19,850. It could be 24,000. We don't know. So none of those zeros are significant. The only sig fig is this 2. This one, all of these zeros that come before the non-zero numbers start are not significant. So none of those 3 zeros are significant. The only 2 significant figures are the 4 and the 5. And in our last example, the 0 that comes before the non-zero number is considered significant, or excuse me, is not considered significant. But because this 0 comes between non-zero numbers, and also because it's, after a decimal point, it is considered, so between sig figs, this one is considered to be a significant figure. There we go. So these 4, 3, 0, and 5 are the significant figures in that last example. All right, that's all of our notes on significant figures. You're done.